I'm Trinity Anderson, and this is our compilation of Chapter 5, which we've called Complex Hobbies. In this chapter, we stayed closer to home, remaining in Australia, travelling from the Gold Coast and Brisbane down through the Blue Mountains to Sydney. But the questions we asked were bigger than ever. We explored what happens when extreme comfort threatens our wellness, the vital difference between rest and recovery, how complex hobbies protect our brains, and why we might need to actively choose struggle in an age of abundance. We've stitched these lessons into one continuous journey. Our first stop is the Gold Coast, where my foster father is meeting the creator of the Rubbish Rebellion, exploring the wellness benefits of having an altruistic passion project to direct our attention outward and avoid toxic rumination. Today on the Gold Coast of Queensland, Australia, we're exploring the benefits of having an altruistic passion project. We'll pause for a memory about an overnight train in Italy and finish with a tiny action to spark your own purpose-driven project.
Willpower, grit, determination, AI. I know one of the reasons I really wanted to talk with you is because of you learning AI and your knowledge of AI. Because we're coming into a world where the stated purpose of AI is to replace people as workers.
That's right.
People are going to lose their jobs. How much? We don't know.
No.
But people are going to lose their jobs. They're going to lose identity. They're going to lose purpose. They're going to feel disjointed. They're going to not know what to do. How do you think people could perhaps access willpower, grit, determination to move past and healthily into a world where there's perhaps no employment?
Well, to me, it's you've got to walk outside, breathe the fresh air, and look around you and say, what can I do for this earth that I live in? Because they've been given another choice. Because the medial tasks have been taken away. I see, and you will see when we go out kayaking, I'm not saying this is for everybody to go kayaking, but it's more about what can I do for the planet?
Back in mid-December, while filming the end of a 20-month project in Uganda, my foster father discovered the Rubbish Rebellion YouTube channel. He sent a message hoping to catch up and learn more about Rubbish Rebellion's work. On the long flight back to Australia from Istanbul, he had felt a familiar, creeping listlessness. This always happens to him at the end of a big project. He knew he had to find another commitment to pour his energies into, otherwise that lost feeling would threaten to become permanent. He hoped that this discussion on Australia's Gold Coast would help him find his next mission.
We're here next to the water, which is what you do.
Yes.
They are speaking in front of the very waterways where the litter is collected and the Rubbish Rebellion is filmed.
Could you please tell me who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name is Shez Rafter and I'm retired. Since I've retired, I've become an author of children's books, mainly the Rubbish Rebellion series.
As he listened to Ches talk, my foster father couldn't stop thinking about how much he also needed to create a meaningful project like this. Her work was inspiring him, even though he didn't yet know exactly what his new project would look like.
Which actually teaches and educates young children about the damage in a fun way, because children need something fun to learn, but in a fun way about the damage that, rubbish and litter in our environment and ecosystem, what it does to animals and the marine life and just the world itself.
Initially, my foster father came here to explore how personal struggles result in post-traumatic growth. But through their conversation, he increasingly realised that enduring strength was anchored in this project. It reinforced just how vital it was for him to find another project to help maintain his own focus and strength. directing our attention away from egocentric rumination towards outcomes greater than ourselves is a powerful wellness tool.
Yeah, it's given me purpose. So that's what I do. I actually go out in my kayak and I litter pick and I get the rubbish out of the water. And it's a way of me giving back to the community. And being out on the water is an extension. My kayak becomes an extension of me, of myself, because I'm so limited on land. I can't walk very well. I can't walk very far. But once I'm out there, I'm free.
Do you want to tell me about that?
What's
About
this?
the background to...
I have polio.
Mm-hmm.
I actually contracted polio when I was 2, but it's never stopped me in my lifetime. And I think it's always been, you know, I can do this, I can do this. And it just makes you strong. It's not that you want somebody to have something wrong to become a strong person, but it'll either take you the other way, or you can learn from it and become a stronger person. And I've always been that way. And I think that inner strength has been my motivation too.
That's something I want to drill into, because I just recently went to Uganda and quite a few other places around the world, chasing up the answer to what I call the riddle of steel.
The what, sorry?
The riddle of steel.
Right.
What it is that makes some people, you know the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yes.
And he said, that which does not kill us makes us stronger.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to only apply to some people though.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk with you, because you've got it on your website. Let me see what you've got. Adversity has been my constant companion, yet it has been my greatest teacher.
That's right. Yes.
So what I ask people like yourself who have been through serious adversity and come out the other end stronger is, what do you think it is about you that allowed you to do that?
Well, I didn't want it to define me. Whereas some people, you know, a scar on their arm will actually define them. You know, that they can't, that's all that they can focus on. I just wanted to focus on getting well.
Time for a short intermission. A personal story about my mother Liz, from August in 1993. She and her childhood friend David were on an overnight train travelling south through Italy towards the port city of Brindisi. Following the bus robbery they had experienced in Rome, their paranoia was at an all-time high. They were sharing a cramped 6-person cabin with a mix of strangers, an Italian local, a German couple who had already been robbed twice that very day, and a young British backpacker named Junior. The Italian passenger used hand signals to warn everyone to stay awake and guard their bags. Despite these dire warnings, the rhythmic, heavy rocking of the train eventually knocked everyone out by 1 in the morning, including Liz and Junior. David was left as the sole sentry, his foot up against the door handle to resist unwanted visitors. It was a tense, exhausting night, with shadowy figures periodically peering into the cabin from the dim corridor. David noticed one particular man pacing outside their door, fondling small bags of cocaine. David quickly realised the dealer wasn't just looking for an opportunistic theft. He was intensely focused on the sleeping Junior. The dealer had his eyes all over the young British man, clearly profiling him and targeting him as a potential customer based entirely on Junior's black skin. Junior was just an exhausted traveller trying to catch some rest. But the grimier elements of the world had already projected a toxic stereotype onto him. David sat quietly in the dark, guarding not just the luggage, but standing watch over his sleeping cabin mate. It was a stark observation of racial profiling and the unseen burdens people carry. A quiet realization for David as he began recognizing the unfair assumptions placed on others and the value of intervening when you can. Liz and David would be even more powerfully confronted by this when they arrived in Johannesburg 11 weeks later. Apartheid was battling to keep its foul claws embedded in South Africa. But we've got a lot of stories to tell before that one. I'm starting to think that with publishing one Plog vlog episode a week, it'll take about a decade to tell my mother's story properly.
I think people forget that we're all here on a journey and we've all got different pathways.
Let's look at the science behind the wellness aspects of having a passion project like the Rubbish Rebellion. Research suggests that engaging in purposeful, non-egocentric activities is consistent with higher psychological well-being. When we direct our attention outward to help a community or an environment, we interrupt the loop of internal rumination that is one of the negative aspects of the egocentrism that is growing in many societies.
And I'm still learning. I'm still on this journey. It's not like it's just stopped.
Maybe that's a thing.
Yeah.
Maybe the fact that you acknowledge and you're open to still learning. There's a thing, the psychological construct, which is really well established, called openness to experience.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are low in it. They like things to stay the same.
Yes.
Some people are very high in it. They seek out new experience, they seek out new learning, they seek out new ways of doing things.
Well, that's why that's very bad English, yes. That's why I'm using the computer more. I'm doing the social media things, but I'm learning how to do animation and things like that, because children today are growing up in a different world. And a lot of parents aren't sitting down and reading a book, or the children aren't flicking through books. Everything's on iPhones and all of that. And I thought, well, if I can bring out my books in a different way, of like creating my Otto the Otter, reading
Which is
his
an
own book.
animated
Yes,
series.
it's an animated version of himself.
Yeah.
But I've animated the book as well.
Yeah.
So when he's reading the book to his co-side, I've created this other character who is reading it to Bunty the bear. And so he's looking at the book, but the book is moving, the character himself. And he will be reading the other books in the series as well. Because it's just the way I want to bring that journey of my storytelling in a different way.
In a changing world where artificial intelligence threatens to automate our jobs and replace us as workers, finding a passion project is more important than ever. It helps maintain our agency and reduces toxic rumination. Let's look at how to start. Here is the tool. Deliberately choose a task that serves something larger than your own immediate needs and think about how this could be expanded into a larger project. It doesn't need to be as grand as the Rubbish Rebellion. How about trying a 10-minute micro project for your community today? Wipe down a public park bench, weed a shared garden bed, or simply tidy up a corner of your street.
You mentioned the words grit and determination.
That's me. Yeah, that's that inner.
Now, there's this theory of grit by Angela Duckworth. She's worth looking up if you haven't seen it. She's done some research into what it is that makes people successful. And it's not talent. It's grit. It's the ability to keep going when things get hard.
It's determination.
It is determination, because talent alone is not going to get you there if you're not willing to put in the effort.
That's right.
So you've got use the two words, the two ones that she used, grit and determination. I noticed those when we were looking at that.
And I think the grit is the hard inner. It's like a grinding inside, and it doesn't go away. It's like, okay, I can't do that today, but I'm going to have a go at it again tomorrow.
Someone might stumble across this and they don't feel they have grit.
I think everybody's got grit.
Then how do we bring that out? What do you think?
Oh, it comes from the mind. And you have to really want to do it. If you don't know, a lot of people are scared. Some people, they need that motivation. And it's not until you try, and the trying gives you that motivation.
Do you want to go out and pick up some rubbish?
Let's go.
If a passion project pulls us out of our own heads, how do we keep our ego from taking over? Next, we head to Karawatha Forest to explore avoiding egocentrism by doing the work, without seeking the spotlight.
All your might. Now the song you were just singing down there. Baby! Whoa, I don't know. Oh, I can't believe we've embarrassed him.
Awesome.
The man that sings in public all the time. I have to bring myself to it.
I think it's really important, especially as a creator, to try to avoid egocentrism, to try and avoid being the center of attention.
Yeah.
So I try wherever possible to create so that I'm not the center of attention. So when we were coming in here today, when you asked me to come in, and you're talking about, in a lot of your videos, why people are unbroken, what it is about them. And I'm thinking, how do I make this not about me?
Today, in Karawatha Forest, we're exploring how to avoid egocentrism. We'll pause for a memory about Italian tourist hustlers and finish with an anonymous act of service that you can try. You've just seen Eric singing on Yagura Rock, a place my foster father used to call Pride Rock because of its resemblance to where Simba was presented to the world. Eric runs a documentary film company in Brisbane, Australia, and is a man with an amazing story of adversity and strength. But that's his story to tell, not ours. You also saw Eric starting an interview with my foster father. Usually, my foster father declines interviews. He finds them too focused on him as an individual, and he deliberately tries to avoid that kind of egocentrism. He prefers to be a quirky prop in the background of more important stories. But he agreed to be part of this Unbroken 61 documentary because it explores the exact questions we focused on in our last chapter. That is, what is it that makes people stronger after adversity, rather than breaking them? He hopes to pass that torch to Eric and Ellie, the documentary makers walking through the noisy summer cicadas with him now, because he believes that they will do a better job with the concept than Plog Vlog ever could. While Ali films Eric and my foster father picking up litter, let's talk about the wellness aspects of stepping out of the spotlight. In his travels, my foster father has noticed a clear pattern. People who talk more about their passion projects than they talk about themselves often seem more psychologically well. As a creator on social media, the pull toward egocentrism is constant. The platforms reward self-promotion, personal drama, and manufactured pride, much like standing on an electronic pride rock and seeking applause. But that kind of self-centered focus is notoriously brittle. It traps you in a loop of monitoring how you are perceived by strangers. By intentionally avoiding egocentrism, by making the work about the message, the place, or the project instead of ourselves, we protect our mental well-being. It shifts the burden of worth off our own shoulders and places it onto a shared, meaningful endeavour.
So I'm going to put my plogging legs on and I'll power ahead. See, this is the power of plogging.
Time for a short intermission. It's my opportunity to share a personal story from 1993. It was August, and my mother Liz and her childhood friend David were stuck in the Italian port city of Brindisi, waiting for a 19-hour overnight ferry to Patras in Greece. Their exhaustion was heavy, and the theft paranoia they had carried across Italy was at its absolute peak. Even the local banks operated like high-security fortresses, using automated metal detector airlock doors that trapped you inside and yelled recorded warnings in Italian if you were carrying too much metal. Wearing their battered Australian hats, David and Liz walked the streets to kill time, only to be relentlessly targeted by aggressive restaurant touts. To David's intense irritation, the hustlers had learned just enough Australian slang to manufacture a fake, jarring familiarity. They repeatedly shoved menus into David's face, shouting in thick Italian accents, "G'day, mate," "Come and have a pizza, cobber." The phrase grated on David so much that he seriously considered telling the hustlers that calling someone a cobber was an insult in Australia. The sheer absurdity of the global tourist machine was grinding their nerves to dust. Finally escaping the relentless hustle, they boarded the ferry, opting for the cheapest deck class tickets. They spent a damp, misty night out in the elements, trying to sleep across hard, green plastic chairs, while tightly guarding their bags. In the middle of the night, David watched in disbelief as other passengers casually came up to the deck to smoke a joint, something he thought was a wildly brazen and risky thing to do on an international border crossing ferry. It was a stark contrast, moving from the high-stress paranoia of fortress banks and fake familiarity into the damp, gritty, but strangely liberating reality of sleeping on plastic chairs in the middle of the ocean.
Aren't you tired to do CPR on someone?
I just remembered I was African. I forgot that.
You forgot you were African?
Oh, God.
No, I'm not God. I think we've lost our cameraman. There we go. Yagara Rock. Plate.
Eh?
This rubbish is served up on a plate. There we go.
I need a break.
You can have a break at the top. Hello?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt your... I'm showing these guys how to keep up with old people.
How to what?
Keep up with old people.
Yeah, I know. What does it say, please? Hey, mate, I love your beard.
Thank you. I call it neglect.
Ah, okay. Noted.
We're actually... Let's see. Actually filming for a documentary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Soon we will reflect on the impacts of egocentrism and provide a tool that you could put into practice to avoid the most negative aspects. But first, let's listen to what Eric and my foster father had to say about adversity up on that rock.
You know, when we began, he was talking about adversity. We don't sit where we are today unless we've been through some things in our lives.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's been through a lot.
I'm actually going to say
Yeah.
something at that point,
Yeah.
because I think I can contribute a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a saying, very old, Seneca I think said it, an old philosopher, is that I pity the person who has never been tested, for they don't know what they are capable of. So you've been tested.
Yeah.
I'm not going to share your story, but you've been tested.
Yeah.
We've all been tested. Some people in the world at the moment
Yeah.
have not been tested, or possibly even worse, don't embrace being tested.
Okay.
We're heading towards a world where AI is going to
Oh, yeah.
help us. It's going to, I've mentioned this before, stated purpose of AI is to replace us in the workforce. Now, you're not going to be replaced. You have your purpose. You have the parkrun. You have this. Many people may not ever get the possibility to define themselves and find purpose through work. And it's my hope that through what all of us are doing, what these guys are doing, what we're doing here with our own filming, is meeting people like you who can share that purpose, that drive, that response to adversity that results in post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic disorder.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
So
agree.
you recently went through serious trauma that put you in hospital. I won't share too much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You, let's say 10 years ago, went through serious trauma that
Yeah.
put you in hospital.
Yeah.
You're both on top of this rock.
Let's get back now to avoiding egocentrism and make all this useful to you. When we obsess over ourselves, our own image, status, or comfort, we activate what neuroscientists call the default mode network, the part of the brain associated with self-referential rumination. Overactivity in this network is consistently linked to higher levels of anxiety and dissatisfaction. The tool to combat this is something called a non-egocentric audit, done by deliberately thinking about and engaging in tasks and projects where you are not the centre of the story. Just like how the Unbroken 61 team works to shine a light on others' resilience, rather than on the filmmakers themselves. You could try an anonymous act of service today. Perhaps pick up a few pieces of litter or tidy a shared space, and deliberately tell absolutely no one about it. Doing good without seeking credit breaks the loop of needing external validation. Perhaps the next time you get asked to feature in a documentary, you could flip it to be all about something more important. If you want to see how that can be done, you'll find a link to Unbroken 61's interview with my foster father in the description.
See that tower over there?
Yeah.
The little spire?
Yeah.
You sing into that. Go.
Wait, what tower?
See that tree sticking up? You are singing to that tree with all your might.
Avoiding egocentrism quiets the brain's default mode network. But what protects us from doing nothing at all? In Brisbane, we introduced the Christmas campaign, a project focused on resisting sedentary meaninglessness and finding intentional friction against the existential vacuum. Today in Brisbane, Australia, we're exploring Plog Vlog's Christmas campaign passion project. We'll pause for a memory about visiting the Acropolis and finish with a tiny action to help resist atrophy.
All this is to fund Plog Vlog's Christmas campaign. It's an awareness campaign about the slippery slope into sedentary meaninglessness that people are at risk of as AI takes over all the hard things in life. So what happens when there's no longer a need to strive or struggle? We have to make our own choices about that. Will we decide to sit down and have what we might think of as the perfect life on the couch with the perfect Netflix videos? Or will we take the time and put the effort into going out into the world and doing something that actually gives us purpose despite the fact that we don't really need to? Morning, everyone. Got any empty bottles you want to get rid of? I did not find these in here. That was on Compton Road. Like literally half an hour on Compton Road. No, I collected to fund like a project I'm working on.
You just finished watching my foster father out in the pounding heat of the Australian summer. He's near a bushland water storage for the suburb of Karabie, located in Karawatha Forest, and he is searching for cans and bottles. After finishing the long project that resulted in Chapter 4, he felt a bit listless. But participating in the Rubbish Rebellion and Unbroken 61 projects inspired him to develop an ongoing mission for Plog Vlog. To understand the project, we must examine the problem. Since the Industrial Revolution, human physical effort has become optional for many. Despite Australia's sporty reputation, nearly half of adults sit for most of their workday, and over 3/4 fail to meet national physical activity guidelines. Even more worrying, nearly 80% of children are also living increasingly sedentary lives. As machines took over hard work, people slid into physical inactivity, resulting in their bodies starting to atrophy. We suspect a similar thing might happen with our minds. As artificial intelligence becomes more capable, we will have the opportunity to slide into mental inactivity, likely resulting in mental atrophy. We think that many people wouldn't find meaning in a life of doing and thinking very little, although some might think that'd be heaven. So our Christmas campaign focuses on offering alternatives to this physical and mental inactivity. We are earning money from collecting cans and bottles to fund a large promotion of a Christmas video. We'll boost it on Christmas Day and for 2 weeks after, a time when many reflect on life's meaning. We're trying to bring the message of picking effort instead of comfort, hopefully finding people who might otherwise choose a sedentary life they'd eventually grow to hate. It's time for the usual short intermission, where I bring you a personal story from my mother's life. It was August in 1993, and the grinding physical toll of long-term travel had finally caught up with my mother Liz and her childhood friend David. They were suffering from a nasty bug caught back in Rome, battling sore throats, harsh coughs, and bad stomachs. They endured a hot, miserable train ride on hard seats across Greece into Athens, an experience that completely stripped away any romantic illusions of European travel. Desperate to avoid staying in the smoggy city centre, they pitched their rapidly deteriorating, bent-pegged tent on the hard, pebbly ground of a campsite in Rafina. It was a bizarre and deeply uncomfortable place. The showers pumped sticky, salty water. Their neighbours were a loud extended family who seemed to permanently live there, butchering large amounts of meat on a plastic sheet on the communal floor and loudly watching war movies on a television inside their tent. Despite feeling physically terrible, David and Liz forced themselves to check the tourist boxes. They took a bus into Athens to see the Acropolis. But the magic just wasn't there. The ancient ruins were veiled in thick smog and pollution. Looking out over the city, David made a sharp observation. Unlike other cities that felt distinctly rich, poor, dangerous, or beautiful, he said to Liz that Athens just felt bored. Not boring, just more like a giant creature that was jaded. This memory perfectly captures the feeling of meaninglessness. Citizens and tourists seemed to be just going through the motions, with Liz and David just ticking off a world wonder because they felt they had to, not because it brought them purpose. It demonstrates that just showing up isn't enough. You need an active, driving purpose to clear the smog off a listless life.
There we go. Look, this drain that comes out there. That's flowing that way. That's newer reforestation.
Let's get back to our imaginary, or perhaps prophetic world of AI supercomfort to find a purpose to make this video useful for people who are open to change, and ways for you to feel useful even before the AI Santa arrives. My foster father is now in the bush beside a freeway. He realised this is a great place to collect cans to fund the Christmas campaign, because items thrown from car windows eventually wash down into the drains and waterways, collecting in these hidden spots. That's part of why we come here, because we don't collect cans and bottles from bins. Locals who are short on money often rely on those for extra cash, so we intentionally collect in places where others don't usually go. We're focusing specifically on cans and bottles when at home, because picking up general litter in Brisbane's urban areas has become too frustrating. My foster father has designated those urban streets as lost causes, using them instead as a source of funding, while saving energy to collect other litter for oases where the impact sticks. As you can see, there is no shortage of funding material. His bike is already filled to capacity, and there are still plenty of cans left behind. When we look at the science behind this, research suggests that when we remove all physical and cognitive friction from our days, we risk falling into what Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum. Our bodies and minds are designed to respond to challenge. Without it, we experience atrophy. That's what the Christmas video and the Christmas campaign that supports it are all about. Choosing to use safe adversity and meaningful actions to create meaning in life. Here is the tool. Find intentional friction, challenges that you might not have to face or impose some safe adversity. When artificial intelligence and convenience strip away the need to struggle, you either choose to manufacture your own or slide down the slippery slope into sedentary meaninglessness. You could try adding one small, unnecessary physical effort to your day-to-day. Park at the furthest end of the car park, take the stairs, or walk a difficult trail. Choosing intentional friction pushes back against the existential vacuum, but our bodies still need time to heal. Staying in the Brisbane Bushlands, we examine the critical difference between true recovery and mere rest, and why this is important to help resist physical and mental atrophy. Today, in a couple of different bushlands in Brisbane, Australia, we're exploring the difference between recovery and rest. We'll pause for a memory about an overloaded Greek ferry and finish with a tiny action to help resist physical and mental atrophy. You are watching my foster father collecting bottles and cans in the soaking rain and steaming heat of the Australian summer. He crushes the cans to fit into the carrier of his folding bicycle, gathering funds for Plog Vlog's Christmas campaign. While he carries his bike through the gate into Karawatha Forest, I need to share a shift in how we make these videos. On top of the stresses of recently moving out of home, I'm seriously struggling as a first-year teacher. I am genuinely worried about burning out. Because of this, I simply no longer have the time or the mental energy to research and write these Plog Vlog scripts. My foster father is going to have to take over that heavy lifting. This is hard for him because he is openly honest about not being a very smart man, and he struggles to read. But I am still deeply emotionally attached to Plog Vlog. I believe the ideas it shares are important and could truly enhance some people's lives. I'm also still fiercely committed to telling my deceased mother's story. I refuse to let Liz be forgotten, like so many other people who died during the pandemic years. Moving forward, I will support my foster father by fact-checking what he narrates from the field, writing corrections and explanations where necessary. I just ask that he continue to include the intermission stories about Liz's life. For this episode, let's hear what he has to say about the concepts of recovery and rest.
At Plog Vlog, we could give the impression that we are constantly out on a fantastic adventure traveling around the world. We do enough filming during the school holidays to be able to just stitch that all together and look like we've got this life that is really not possible for most people. But we're going to be real about this. We don't. We film on the holidays and come back and work during the school term to be able to get enough money to go and do that again. Another important part of that is that it gives us time to recover. And this week's Plog Vlog episode is going to be about the concept of recovery versus rest. As a former personal trainer and fitness instructor, recovery is an important term. What it means is that you have created stimuli that is going to make your body less fragile, physically and or mentally. And then you need time for your body to recover and adapt to that so that you become less fragile. You might call that stronger. If we rest too much, which is what we do when we've gone beyond recovery, we end up in a situation where the body goes backwards rather than forwards. So let's look at recovery as recovery from adverse stimuli, from stimulation. Morning, how you going? Good. And rest is what happens when you get beyond recovery. Something that concerns me when I ask other people who work in education what they're going to do on their holidays, and we do get a lot of holidays, is I say to them, well, what are you up to on the holidays? What do you got planned? And so many of them say, oh, I'm resting. I want to get some rest, sleeping, catching up on Netflix. Now see the word? The word is rest. They perhaps think they're going to recover, but by the end of the holidays, they've rested so much that they're actually going backwards. What worries me, and I've said this in a lot of other episodes, is that we might be heading into a world where AI provides us the opportunity to do nothing but rest if we choose to. Maybe even that is the thing that is promoted to us. In fact, in my society, it already is. Rest is sold to people as something that is good, rather than something that causes them to go backwards and become unwell. Our concern about this is why Plog vloggers decided to focus on one particular video. A video filmed on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in London. That video talks about a future where AI gives us that opportunity to rest all the time. Now, let me create a picture for you. You'll all know it. You've all seen WALL-E. Now, when I talk about WALL-E, people understand what I mean by a life of rest. But unfortunately, people get focused on the body image. That often happens. So let's say, you know how they're drinking those sippy cups? Let's say those sippy cups make them ultra buff. Everyone is beautiful and buff and even physically capable of everything. So that takes away the physical unwellness that comes from resting too much. So let's say that. Everyone's buff, everyone's beautiful. Everyone can do anything they want. They're super strong, super fit, just because of drinking out of their sippy cups. Let's say though, they don't use that capability for anything. They still ride around in their electric pushchairs. They still watch their screens in front of them. They still communicate just via those screens. Aren't we pretty much doing that already? So imagine that world. Imagine also another group of people. And that group of people recognize the risk of that. And what they do is they seek out safe adversity. They seek out things that are uncomfortable, like this, and they go out and do that. And while they're out there, they look for things that matter to do that AI wouldn't bother, that the people who are earning squillions out of AI wouldn't bother spending money on. Like this, right? Now that's why we've chosen to focus on, whenever we're in Brisbane, picking up stuff like this that can earn money for that Christmas campaign.
My foster father paints a stark picture of where extreme comfort might lead us. It is a warning about what happens when we stop needing to actively participate in life. On that note, let's pause for a story about my mother Liz and look at what an extreme climb looks like. Time for a short intermission, an opportunity for me to remember some of my mother's life. It was mid-August, and my mother Liz and her childhood friend David had travelled by ferry to the Greek island of Tinos, just before the Festival of the Assumption. The island was home to the icon of the Annunciation, a relic reputed to have miraculous healing powers. Because of this, the small island was completely overrun by nearly 30,000 devout pilgrims. Liz and David watched in absolute awe at the intense, painful dedication of the believers. Devout women were crawling on their bloodied and scabbed knees, all the way from the docks up the long, wide road to the church at the top of the hill. They endured this profound, intense, and physically agonizing display of faith just to kiss the glass casing of the icon. But on August 15th, the festival ended, and tens of thousands of visitors decided to leave the island at the exact same time, hoping to catch a quiet ferry to the neighbouring island of Syros. Liz and David headed to the docks, only to find themselves swallowed by a terrifying mass exodus. They were crammed onto a dangerously overloaded ferry named the Demetra. The boat was so packed with people, luggage and cars that it tilted precariously to one side. Its waterline plunged terrifyingly deep below the surface. Surrounded by arguing, panicked crowds and filthy conditions, they endured a 45-minute cruise of absolute chaos, genuinely terrified that the lopsided ship might capsize. This memory perfectly captures two extremes of human energy. First, the extreme, sacrificial devotion of the pilgrims. much like the deep, purpose-driven calling many feel when they enter professions like teaching. But when you are forced into an overcrowded, chaotic, and unsupported system, that beautiful devotion quickly turns into pure survival panic. You stop climbing toward a higher purpose and start just praying that the ship doesn't sink. I feel that way pretty much every day before walking into the classroom. Enough about me. Let's get back to recovery versus rest to make this useful to you. My foster father is right to be concerned about our society's trajectory. Current research indicates that if artificial intelligence makes physical and mental activity entirely optional, sedentariness will likely skyrocket. We already know from Australian data that a vast majority of adults fail to meet basic physical activity guidelines. When people are given the choice between safe adversity, those self-imposed challenges that build antifragility, and pure rest, they overwhelmingly choose rest. But as we saw on the Demetra, unsupported systems eventually break down. Infinite rest without challenging stimuli leads to profound physical and mental atrophy. Let's listen now to what my foster father had to say about finding his own freedom to speak about these sorts of things on camera.
Two things have happened with Plog Vlog that previously I might have thought of as terrible or catastrophic even. The first is that Trinity has moved out of home and has handed over most of the responsibility of production to me. She doesn't really mind what I do with the channel as long as I keep in the intermission stories about Liz, her mother. The other thing is that we've turned off all the short form videos on the channel and our viewership has plummeted precipitously. Morning, how you going? Have a good day. That you might think is a bad thing, but I found it's freed me up to not really worry about what the audience thinks. I can just come out, I can prattle on about the things that I think matter, and you don't have to worry about whether someone is going to want to keep viewing or keep scrolling through to the next short form video or click through to a long form video.
He certainly does enjoy prattling on, and for good or bad, that's going to have to be the direction of the channel until I get my teaching sea legs. As I mentioned earlier, I'm really struggling to cope with my new job as a teacher, which is another reason why he is narrating more of these episodes and making a lot of the script up on the spot while he collects litter. We have accepted that this might just have to be the way of things moving forward. So, he is going to study the weekly construct by listening to podcasts created by reliable sources. This means that I will only need to fact-check him and provide some background, rather than write whole narrations from scratch. To avoid the sedentary atrophy outcome my foster father warned about, we need a tool. Here is a potential one. Deliberately impose safe adversity upon yourself. If you do nothing else today, try adding one small, unnecessary physical effort to your day, like parking at the furthest end of the car park, or taking the stairs instead of the lift. Perhaps find something that's a little difficult, that also has meaning for you. That's what they call finding meaning in life rather than finding the meaning of life. I sincerely hope that I can make it through my first year of teaching. Statistics show that up to half of early career teachers in Australia leave the profession within their first 5 years due to burnout. I'm terrified of burning out before I even manage to pay off my student debt. But for now, I will keep fact-checking and he will keep plogging. If infinite rest leads to atrophy, how do we actively build robustness? We head up to Mount Nebo to look at building antifragility through safe adversity, rather than passively accepting the extreme comfort provided by an AI Santa. I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. Today, in Mount Nebo, in Queensland, Australia, we're exploring a rather unusual question. What is a bigger threat to humanity, plastic litter or the artificial intelligence Santa? I'll let my foster father explain.
On this windy and rainy morning in Mount Nebo, we'd like your input on something. Traditionally, Plog has wandered the world picking up plastics to encourage other people to do the same thing. But recently, in London on Christmas Day, it occurred to me that maybe there's something more important we could be doing. Maybe we should be focusing on the wellness of humans rather than just the wellness of the planet. Because realistically, these plastics, they're going to just end up becoming a thin geological layer in the long term. But humans are living their lives now, and humans might be heading for a future where, at least in my society, where AI gives them everything they think they want. And maybe that's not what they need. Maybe taking away struggle, maybe taking away the need for effort is actually bad for humans. And maybe Plog can give people an alternative to that by collecting cans and bottles and using that to raise money to promote videos of the alternatives to living a life where the AI Santa just gives you everything.
My foster father is setting up a premise that challenges our channel's traditional litter-picking focus. He discussed the concept of the AI Santa, a future where artificial intelligence and extreme convenience completely remove the need for human effort. I wonder how many people would thrive in a world where all physical and cognitive friction is removed from their lives. Or would most people end up in a state of profound boredom and unsatisfying emptiness? My foster father is suggesting that extreme comfort is not a utopia, but a direct threat to human wellness.
In places like Mount Nebo, there really probably aren't going to be a lot of bottles and cans. And if I'm going to find any, it's going to be in places like this across from a coffee shop. So in places where there aren't many opportunities to pick up bottles and cans, I think that I should focus on picking up plastics. Whereas when I'm in Brisbane, where bottles and cans are literally everywhere, I think I should focus on picking those up to fund the Plog Christmas campaign. And that way, spread the word about what we're calling antifragility. Well, it's not us calling it that. So what antifragility is, it's a concept where the human body actually has the capacity to not just be resilient. So if you imagine, right, I'm holding a rubber ball and I'm bouncing that rubber ball. Now that rubber ball, it's resilient, it'll bounce back up. But over time, that rubber ball will wear out. That rubber ball does not get stronger because I'm bouncing it. Whereas a human body, when you put it under adversity, if it gets enough chance to recover, not rest, we talked about that in the last episode. If it gets enough chance to recover, the body and mind, they become stronger, they become less fragile. So what we'd like to do with Plog is to give people that alternative. So on the one hand, we've got rest. AI gives us what we want. Rest. We become fragile. We've got in the middle, we've got the concept of resilience, which is probably more of a mental outlook towards things, a way of looking at life and the world. And then you've got antifragility, which is a deliberate acceptance and deliberate imposition of adversity in one's own life for the purpose of becoming anti-fragile, becoming more robust than you were before, rather than becoming fragile.
My foster father gives a layperson explanation of a theory popularised by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. In this theory, the continuum moves from fragility, through resilience, and into anti-fragility. The rubber ball metaphor illustrates resilience. It bounces back, but eventually experiences wear and tear. Biological systems, however, are designed to be antifragile. They actually require stress to grow stronger. We will explore how to actively apply this shortly, but first, it is time for a short intermission. A personal story taken from my mother's old journals. In August 1993, my mother Liz and her childhood friend David arrived on the Greek island of Samos, eager to book tickets to Turkey. This was before it was called Turkey. You might remember my foster father picking up litter there in recent Plog vlog episodes. Anyway, back to the story. At the ticket counter, disaster struck. My mother's friend David realised his passport was gone. For a normally hypervigilant backpacker, it was a crushing mistake. He had left it with a campsite manager on the island of Syros. A helpful Greek ferry worker arranged for the passport to travel on the next day's ferry, leaving David and Liz in a 24-hour state of highly anxious limbo. Their entire trip completely out of their control. Desperate for distraction, they visited a local circus, wandering backstage just as workers were cleaning enclosures. In a terrible miscalculation, the workers forced 3 fully grown tigers into a single, cramped holding cage. Deciding 3 was a crowd, the massive cats suddenly turned on each other. A terrifying, deafening brawl broke out just meters from where Liz and David stood. A female tiger unleashed a brutal strike, catching the huge male in the forehead and leaving a gruesome gash. The next morning, David's passport arrived safely. Flooded with relief, he tipped the ferry worker with cash and ouzo, and they left Greece and the tigers and headed to Turkey.
All through chapter 4 and the first couple of episodes of chapter 5, we were looking at the concept of finding answers to the riddle of steel. In other words, chasing down people in the world who'd found strength through response to adversity. Perhaps we scaled that back a little bit and instead focus on that concept of antifragility. Not necessarily the extreme of strength through really, really difficult experiences, but more through finding antifragility through self-imposed, safe adversity. So doing things like getting up early in the morning, going for a little bit of a walk in the rain when you're not going to die, cold water immersion perhaps. And one of the things that people are really familiar with is the concept of, let's say, resistance exercise. This is a really good example. If you are doing resistance exercise, lifting heavy things, things that your body has to struggle with, then what happens is that creates a stimuli that your body then responds to. And if you get appropriate recovery, you become physically stronger, or the muscles that were worked become physically stronger. That can happen with the mind as well. And also, of course, with various other systems in your body. You place your body under appropriate safe adversity, and then your body becomes better. And your mind. I keep forgetting the mind. So, do you think that that is a more important thing for Plog Vlog to focus on than just the picking up of plastics out of the environment? Maybe you think that picking up plastics and helping out the environment that way is something that's more important. Or maybe we should try to do both. Don't know. Look, this is a transition phase for Plog Vlog. Trinity is doing less of this. You can see that in this episode. And I'm having to be more of the focus and the voice for the channel, which is actually quite difficult for me because, like, I'm not a really bright guy. My IQ is actually below average. And I have a great difficulty rote learning stuff. I can't rote learn a script. I have to actually study these ideas in the weeks before filming so that I can just ad lib like I'm doing now. That's why I stuff up so much. So you're going to have to see more of me. I'm going to ask for your opinions more. But Plog Vlog is still going to be coming to places like this, beautiful places, We're still going to be picking up litter when we don't find cans and bottles. But we are going to focus, I think. I'm going to make this decision right now, right here, right now. Right here, right now, I'm going to make the decision that Plog Vlog is going to pivot, at least for the rest of this year, to picking up cans and bottles for the purpose of finding money or getting money for this Christmas campaign. Because I think there's people out there that could really benefit from hearing this anti-fragility message. And Plog Vlog can communicate practical ways of applying safe adversity to people's lives. Not just communicate it, demonstrate it, model it. There's a saying that don't be a prophet, be a beacon. And I think Plog Vlog could be that. I think we can be a beacon. I don't think we're going to get to a lot of people, but let's say the Christmas campaign, let's say we put $1,500 into advertising that Christmas video from London, and it will get in front of thousands of people. And let's say just one person, just one, sees it and goes, oh, I get it. I'm going to do this. They might be at that low point in their life. Cockatoo, don't interrupt. That low point in their life where they could go one way or the other. They could go, oh, stuff it. I'm just going to relax for the rest of my life. I'm just going to let it happen. Complete external locus control. They could be at that point. And then they see that video. This one person, they see the video and they go, this is an alternative. I don't have to. I don't have to go down that path. And then they choose another. They might choose one small thing. They might get up, instead of laying in bed watching Netflix, they might get up and go for a walk instead. Maybe out in the rain, maybe out in the London cold on Boxing Day or something next year. And then that person goes, okay, I felt good after that. And they understand then the concept of recovery. Yeah, we're going to do that, at least for a year. We're going to focus on that.
Let's fact check what my foster father said. That's my main job at Plog Vlog nowadays, since the pressures of teaching meant I had to take a back seat on this channel. He covers a lot of ground there, but he captures the science accurately. When he talks about self-imposed safe adversity, like resistance exercise or walking in the cold, he is describing the biological concept of hormesis. This is a phenomenon where a beneficial effect results from exposing a system to a low, safe dose of a stressor, which triggers repair and growth mechanisms. He also correctly uses the psychological term external locus of control to describe someone who passively lets life happen to them, contrasting it with the active choice to seek out healthy friction. Let's go back to this episode's question. My foster father has concluded that while plastic litter is a threat to the environment, an AI Santa that strips life of all effort by gifting extreme comfort is a threat to human robustness. Plog Vlog's Christmas campaign is designed to act as a beacon against this slide into sedentary meaninglessness, demonstrating that choosing to do hard, meaningful things is a practical tool for building antifragility. Here's a suggestion for you. Perhaps try his advice. Instead of defaulting to the couch, impose 10 minutes of safe physical adversity on your day. Walk up a steep hill, take a cold shower, or go for a brisk walk at dawn. Maybe even just delay putting on a jacket as soon as you feel cold. Maybe your body will adapt, and you won't even need to carry a jacket as often. Building antifragility is a powerful message, but we need to find the people who are actually ready to hear it. Back in Brisbane, we explore targeted altruism and use the Transtheoretical model of behaviour change to find the right audience for our campaign.
Okay, here's the first one that I found on the actual road.
I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. Today in Brisbane, Australia, we're exploring who's the best audience for our Christmas campaign. But I'll let my foster father explain.
Pretty soon I'm going to tell you about this boater and this bag. But first, I'm going to remind you that in last week's Plog Vlog episode, we committed to picking up bottles and cans for the purpose of promoting a really important idea. And that idea is antifragility. It's the concept that a person goes out and deliberately seeks safe adversity for the purpose of becoming less fragile. Hey, bud, how are you? Anyhow, if I'm going to spend at least a year going out on this boater with this bag, collecting these things to promote that idea, I really want that money to direct the idea to the right people, the people who are open and receptive to it, and also the people who need it. So I'm going to spend today and tomorrow researching who those people might be. And I'll film again tomorrow and let you know what I've found. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk about this boater and this bike. So we've been to Uganda twice in the last couple of years. And in Uganda, these bikes are used for pretty much everything. So they're transport, they are taxis. So I've been 3 up on one of these bikes many times. I've even seen people transporting goats and even a coffin, I don't know whether it was full, across the back of one of these. Since coming back to Australia, I've been looking at my big, gas-guzzling, noisy motorbike and thinking it's just totally not suitable for purpose. And the idea of a boater came to mind. So I went out searching and I found this little Honda CB125F. Cheap as anything, does about 700 kilometers on 11 litres. I have to fill up the DR about every 120 kilometers. So this is the tool that, one of the tools that I'm going to use to collect these to raise the money for promoting antifragility. Now let's talk about the bag. The first reason I went to Uganda was to promote reforestation. So at that time, I was doing menu log deliveries to pay for the advertising of the videos about reforestation that I created, in the hope that people in Australia would take up reforestation, care more about reforestation. I don't think that worked. So eventually I realized that I'm better off planting trees like these over here. See these? See the reforestation that's happening over here? Better off planting trees than spending my weekends out delivering food to people in the hope that other people will plant trees to save these little guys. Hey, buddy.
My foster father is referring to targeted altruism, the psychological principle that directing our efforts toward a highly specific group increases our own sense of agency. It feels more planned than just shouting into the void. Recovering from the flu, his delivery is a bit scattered, but his goal is precise. While he contemplates that audience's attributes, let's pause for a story from my mother's old journals. It was August in 1993, and the relentless, grinding hustle of Turkey had completely exhausted my mother Liz and her childhood friend David. Arriving in the coastal town of Kusadasi, they were battered by constant haggling and the aggressive energy of local sales touts. Retreating to a cheap and humid hotel for the night, the environmental stress finally caught up with David. Desperate for a cold drink, but avoiding the local tap water, he made a disastrous miscalculation and drank a large cola. Because he never consumed caffeine, the chemical hit slammed into his already hypervigilant system. By 3 a.m, Liz lay awake watching him. Unable to sleep, and with his brain racing, David sat in the dim room, intensely scribbling in his journal just to burn off the anxious energy. Suddenly, the heavy quiet was shattered by 3 sharp, deafening cracks. Gunfire from a small-caliber weapon, sounding as if it were right outside their window. Liz jolted upright, heart hammering, only to find David already moving. Fueled by the caffeine and pure survival instinct, he rushed to her side, placing himself between her and the window, his eyes wide and scanning the dark. For Liz, watching him operate in that state of high alert anxiety was unsettling. The simmering tension of the city had literally just exploded outside their door. The next morning, Running on zero sleep and frayed nerves, they were desperate to escape Kusadasi and head for Seljuk. In a hilariously pragmatic move, they accepted a supposedly free ride out of town from a Turkish carpet salesman. As they climbed into his car, Liz and David shared a knowing, resigned look. The ride wasn't actually free. The price of their immediate escape was going to be enduring a captive, high-pressure carpet sales pitch at the other end. They knew they wouldn't buy carpet. They had neither the money nor the pack space.
So I've done my research and I think I've found the right model. It's a Transtheoretical model of behaviour change, or the stages of change model for short. And what it says is that there's 5 stages of change that people go through when they're considering change, or when change happens. Now, I think we only need to think about the first 2, and that's the pre-contemplative stage, when people aren't really thinking about change yet, and then there's the contemplative stage. Now, I think our audience is at the contemplative stage. The pre-contemplative stage, they're not really thinking about it yet. They're not thinking about the dangers of the AI Santa. Whereas once they get to the contemplative stage, imagine this. You've got a person who's sitting on a lounge. They've got the perfect Netflix in front of them. They can access the perfect video games. But they're still just not feeling right. It doesn't feel like their life is complete. They feel like something's missing. That existential vacuum that I've been talking about. Now, that person is possibly just entering the contemplative stage. That's the audience that I think that the Christmas campaign needs to target. Those people are right on the edge. Because the people that are already making the change, they don't need us. They don't need to see. They might like to see the video. It might reinforce what they're doing, but it's a waste of money for us to advertise to that person because they're already doing it. The person at the pre-contemplative stage, they're not ready yet. And I think all they're going to do, all the video will do, is force cognitive dissonance upon them. So they're likely to turn off. In fact, they're probably not a person that's even watched this far through this video because they're just not ready. They're either not ready yet or they will never be ready. And that's fine. Maybe that sort of life is suitable for that person. But what about that person who's just not feeling right? That Netflix just isn't doing it for them. The AI Santa just isn't making their life satisfactory, isn't making them satisfied with the life they've got. What about that person? I think that's our target audience. The next step is to find out how to access that audience through YouTube. I'll let Trinity explain the rest of the Transtheoretical model to you while I have a look up here at the Mount Gravatt lookout for any cans and bottles that might have been dropped last night.
So, rather than broadcasting our Christmas campaign to everyone, we are targeting a very specific audience. We are looking for the person sitting quietly at the crossroads of modern convenience, feeling the heavy pull of a sedentary life, who may just need a gentle shock to choose resilience rather than the atrophy that comes from too much comfort. Maybe the Christmas campaign will only find one person like that. If so, we've decided that is enough. If that's you today, you could bypass your own task paralysis by performing one microact of safe adversity.
Good morning.
Go for a brisk walk at dawn, or pick up a few pieces of litter to provide immediate physical proof of your own agency.
Let's try out my new bag. This one's squashed for me already. Can I get it in? I think it did. Let's see. Did it go in? I don't know. Let me have a look. Yes, they did. They did go in.
Targeting our efforts helps us find the right people. But how will society measure people's value when survival is guaranteed? Travelling between the Gold Coast and Brisbane, we question the economics of status in a post-scarcity world and the dangers of Goodhart's law and moral licensing. I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. Today on the Gold Coast, and the day after in Brisbane, we're exploring the economics of status in a post-scarcity world. Let's head out on the plogging boda.
It's 4:38 in the morning and the new boda has just had its first service. It's got 643 kilometres on it. And what I'm going to do is take it for a there and back again plog to Surfers Paradise. A there and back again plog means that I get there quickly, usually before dawn, and then lazily make my way back and pick up litter on the way back. While I'm doing that, I need something to think about. And my chosen topic today is what will happen if we end up in a utopian future where AI supplies us with everything we need and want? Will we still compete with each other? I think that all organic entities, including humans, have come through the process of evolution, which means there's a pretty good chance that competition for resources or competition for anything is embedded in our genes, and we will never be able to get rid of that. So what is it that we're likely to compete over when AI gives us everything? What do you think? Helps if I put it in gear. Really helps if I put it in gear. God, I'm ambitious. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that the most likely candidate for the things that we will compete over will be social status. We already do it anyhow. And a lot of the things that we buy, a lot of the resources that we buy are actually designed around giving us social status. For example, this little boda is a low status vehicle. Whereas if I was riding a great big BMW 1200, that'd be a high status vehicle. So when we can just walk out and grab a BMW 1200 whenever we want, and people aren't competing over that, what is the status that we compete over? I'm actually thinking that if we have to compete over anything, maybe the best thing to compete over is actually our ability to be a better human. So for example, imagine if we had a system where anyone could study, could do modules that advance themselves as a human being. So your whole role in life is to become the most complete, best human being you can be. And those people who spend most time doing that, who put the most effort into that, actually achieve some sort of social status. It might even be just points, like a video game or something.
What my foster father is describing is a theoretical transition from resource-based competition to a purely reputation-based economy. While achieving self-actualization is a noble goal, tying it strictly to social status gamification fundamentally alters human motivation. Before we unpack the inevitable pitfalls of that system, it's time for an intermission. It's back in August 1993, where we left off last time in Seljuk, Turkey. My mother, Liz, and her childhood friend David woke up with a singular mission. They desperately needed fresh reading material in English. The only place in town offering a book exchange was strategically located deep inside the Australian-New Zealand carpet shop. David, naturally wary of the relentless local hustle, hesitated at the door, bracing for a grueling sales pitch. But Liz, who was quickly evolving into a seasoned tactician of the Turkish bazaars, took the lead. Marching inside with David trailing behind, she commanded the interaction. With charming precision, she secured them both free cups of caffeine-free lemon tea, swapped their paperbacks, and expertly navigated them back out onto the street without having to politely inspect a single rug. It was a monumental, zero-cost victory. Buoyed by her success, Liz readily agreed to David's ambitious afternoon plan. A punishing 9-kilometre hike up a steep mountain road to visit a stone structure reputed to be the final home of the Virgin Mary. The climb under the blistering sun was exhausting. When they finally summited, David immediately immersed himself in the historical and religious implications of the small, quiet altar. Liz, however, remained characteristically pragmatic. Bypassing the historical debates, she zeroed in on the site's spring, reputed to supply sacred water. Producing an empty plastic camera film canister from her bag, she carefully filled and sealed it, securing a highly unique, deeply practical souvenir. Later that afternoon, as they trudged back down the mountain, a heavy, eerie smog rolled across the valley, turning the blazing sun a deep, apocalyptic red. Watching the blood-red light wash over the mountains, Liz smiled. She had conquered a 9-kilometre climb and outmaneuvered a carpet salesman, all in one day.
So we're back again the next day, and I'll get back soon to talking about the value-based economy to measure status. But first I'll talk about the Menulog bag. It just didn't work out. When I was down the Gold Coast, it filled up so quickly, and then I had things actually falling out while I was riding. So I'm going to try out this. I think that should work better. It's convenient. It's full of rocks. So, virtue-based economy. I found a few problems. The first is that what they call Goodhart's law, where when you're measuring something with a tool, you actually find that the tool becomes the goal rather than the actual thing you're trying to measure. We've got a similar thing in Australia with a measurement of academic performance called NAPLAN that we use on children. And it itself has become the goal. So performance on NAPLAN is supposed to measure academic performance against the Australian curriculum. But instead, what people are doing is that they're focusing on performance on NAPLAN instead. So I think in this virtue-based economy, where status is measured on people's improvement as a human being, we could end up with a problem that it's actually the tool itself that becomes the goal, not the actual virtue or improvement as a human being. Ooh. So the next problem with the human virtue-based status economy is moral licensing. And that's working out who exactly it is that decides what are the desirable human attributes that we're going to seek through these measures that assess status. So for one person, it might be altruism. For another, it might be the pursuit of self-interest to be able to grow as a human being. Those two things might actually work against each other. So moral licensing is also a problem. The next problem is the subjectivity of goodness, or the dystopian trap. What this means is, who decides what it means to be a good human? Who sets out the criteria that the measures measure against? We can see this happening in society at the moment, where we have the people who are creating AI are deciding what a good AI, in other words, a good and moral AI is. So we have people at the top potentially deciding who we are as a good person. Do we want to let them do that? And the last one is the potential for the death of true altruism. If good deeds are linked so much with social status, which is then the only currency, Are people actually going to do good deeds for the sake of good deeds? Or are they only going to do it for the rewards they get, the status rewards? And that's exactly why Plog Vlog must always remain a voluntary project. Plog Vlog will never be a business. If Plog Vlog ever starts earning any money, well, we're getting it from Containers for Change. All that money will go back into Plog Vlog to promote the ideas in Plog Vlog.
If you were listening closely, you might have caught my foster father tangling his psychological terms while in the field plogging on the boda. He accidentally defined moral licensing as the problem of who decides what is good. That is actually the dystopian trap. True moral licensing is an internal ledger. It's when you do a good deed, like picking up a bag of litter, and subconsciously feel you've earned a license to do something selfish later. Both are massive flaws in a gamified virtue economy. Combined with Goodhart's law, they shift our drive from intrinsic motivation, doing good for its own sake, to extrinsic motivation, which ultimately corrodes genuine altruism. To anchor yourself in intrinsic purpose today, your tiny action could be to do one completely anonymous good deed that cannot be tracked, measured, or rewarded. If gamifying our virtues corrupts our motivation, what pure pursuits can we rely on? On the long drive from Brisbane to Sydney, we explore how complex, multisensory hobbies build cognitive reserve and neuroplasticity, provided we avoid the traps of hustle culture. I'm Trinity Anderson, the producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. Today, while traversing the highways between Brisbane and Sydney, we're exploring whether complex hobbies can protect our ageing brains from cognitive decline. Let's head out to listen to my foster father pose the focus question for this week's video.
I'm on a 700-kilometre journey in a borrowed electric vehicle between Brisbane and Sydney. And along the way, I'm doing one of my favourite things, and that's thinking about complex ideas. Now, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I do like the inside of my own head. And the question I'm asking myself is, does a complex hobby like doing these Plog Vlog videos help a person from becoming dumber as they get older? So I'm going to explore that idea in front of a giant prawn at dawn. If my ageing brain is correct, the sun's coming up there. So Brisbane is about 200 kilometres as the crow flies that way, and Sydney is about 500 kilometres as the crow flies that way. But it's not really my ageing brain that I'm worried about too much. What got me thinking about this whole getting dumber thing is that there's research showing that young people are getting early onset dementia, which what that means is that there's voids forming in their brain that they can pick up in scans that are similar to what happens to old people as they get dementia. I'm wondering if young people and old people can actually reverse or delay that by doing complex hobbies that require a lot of cognitive input, but also like physical activity, like moving over varied environments and things. So I'm going to do some research on that. Oh, this is a wobbly rock. So I'm going to think about that. I'm going to do some research on that as we make that 500 kilometres that way. And along the way, I'm also going to pick up cans and bottles to fund the Christmas campaign.
My foster father is touching on the biological concept of neuroplasticity. Despite his description of voids forming being a clumsy simplification of neural atrophy, the basics are correct. Research is consistent with the idea that complex multisensory activities help maintain cognitive reserve, acting as a buffer against age-related decline. Before he starts untangling the rest of the science on the road to Sydney, it's time for a short intermission, a chance for me to tell some of my mother's story. It is late August in 1993, and my mother Liz and her childhood friend David had taken a bus to Pamukkale in Turkey, hoping to see the famous snow-white calcium terraces. But instead of a serene natural wonder, they stepped into absolute chaos. The terraces, called the Cotton Castle, were swarming with tourists and aggressive vendors relentlessly selling everything from tablecloths to bird whistles. For David, the sheer volume of humanity and overlapping shouts felt like needles being pushed into his brain. This simmering exhaustion finally boiled over at lunch. They watched a local vendor sell 3 Turkish pizzas to a German family for 50,000 lira each. When the vendor tried to charge David and Liz the exact same inflated tourist price, David stubbornly dug his heels in. What followed was a drawn-out, highly tense battle of wills over what amounted to a few dollars. They eventually won the standoff, securing 2 pizzas for the price of 1. But as Liz watched David eat, she could see his jaw was tight and his eyes were tired. The victory was entirely hollow. The confrontation had cost him far more in mental energy than it had saved in cash. He just stared off into the distance as he chewed. When I spoke with David recently, he told me that this specific day was the first time he started to understand his own introversion. He didn't know the word yet, but he realized a hard biological truth about himself. To function properly, his brain required regular, dedicated time away from the noise of humanity. He told me he had started desperately looking forward to reaching Africa, imagining it as a quiet continent where he could finally sit in silence. My mother, however, loved the hustle and bustle. She thrived on the sound of humans. It was quiet times inside her own head that she dreaded. David said to me, perhaps that's why she drank when she was alone, to quiet the demons when the sounds of humans couldn't.
Oh, thank you. Can you explain it for me? I'm a Queenslander. We're not real smart.
Well, you just
We've got a different system.
just put them all in one by one.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to turn them around.
Oh, yeah.
So that might not be an eligible one. They don't want that one.
They don't want it? Yep.
But you do that, and then at the end of it, you press a button and get a voucher that you
Yep.
can go to Woolworths and collect.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see how this goes. On a rainy day here in Gosford, I just finished trying to negotiate the strange New South Wales deposit system that won't take squash cans or bottles that don't have barcodes on them. The Queensland system is so much better. But anyhow, back to the question of whether complex, cognitively difficult and physically difficult hobbies can help a person from becoming dumber as they get older. And what I've found out is a lot of things. First is the concept of neuroplasticity, in that the brain is very much like muscles, in that if you use them and put them under pressure, they become stronger. So the brain becomes stronger when you use it, but they also atrophy when you don't. So the brain, if you're not putting it under the pressure of a new load, basically learning something that you need to struggle at least a little bit with, the brain will go backwards. So that probably explains the early onset voids that they're seeing in people's brains, perhaps. The other thing is that the brain has the ability to create a cognitive reserve. And what that means is if you practice the same thing over and over and over again, your neuroconnections become like a superhighway. So you become very good at that one thing. The action potentials flow so quickly along this superhighway. But if you're a person like me who loves to learn lots and lots and lots of different things, you instead create a network of neural connections that aren't as strong, but they actually sort of give you a bit of a compensation if your superhighway breaks for some reason. So if your superhighway breaks, let's say I'm really good at piano, which I'm not, and my piano superhighway breaks, what can happen is those other neural connections can bypass around. A little bit like if a superhighway floods or something, you can actually go around alternative routes. So the same thing happens in your brain, is that you have these alternative pathways, and they call that cognitive reserve. Now I've got a whole heap of bottles and cans in here that the New South Wales system wouldn't take, so I'm just going to dump them in this recycle bin. Sacrifice them for the good of the planet rather than the good of the Christmas campaign. There we go. We've come to the lower Macdonald River region of New South Wales. Sydney's over that way, Warragamba Dam is over that way, and there's 2 donkeys down that way. Let's talk about those brain training apps that are supposed to be able to help you with brain decline in age. What the researchers found is that they don't help with that. What they do is they help you become really good at tapping at a screen and really good at handing your money over to the people that make the brain training apps. They don't actually help with generalized brain functioning in the real world. Hey, donkeys. You think that'll do? That'll do, donkey. That'll do. Something that is looking really promising, though, is the rise of what they're calling the grandma and grandpa hobbies. These are multi-sensory, complex, tactile hobbies that people in like our grandparents' days used to do. Let's think about things like complex knitting, crochet, even sort of like building things like motorcycle engines, which is something that I'm actually looking at doing, is actually doing my own servicing on the new motorbike, on the new Boda, the CB125 that I got recently for doing plogging. Another thing that seems to work well, and it's been around for a long time, is the concept of combinatory, did I say that right? Combinatory, like combining, combinatory play. What that means is that when you're stuck on something difficult mentally, you then go and use play to be able to allow your subconscious mind to process and work on that difficult idea. Einstein used to use this when he was working on a physics idea. So if he was stuck, instead of sitting there at a chalkboard for ages just staring, what he'd do is he'd go off and he'd play violin. And what would happen is that the violin was so difficult that it would remove the stress on his conscious mind to allow the subconscious mind to actually start working on the problem. And then gradually that subconscious mind would bring the solution to that problem into consciousness. There's also 2 things that we need to keep an eye out for. And these can undermine the efficacy of the whole hobby as a thing to improve the mind. One of them is called the mastery trap. And what that means is that you get so good at something, at this particular hobby, that it just becomes automatic. And that way the brain isn't actually put under any load and it doesn't actually improve. The other is a really modern thing, and it's called the hustle culture. And this is where you are creating something that could be sold. And you might have your friends around you telling you, oh, why don't you create an Etsy store or something like that? And then all of a sudden, what used to be your thing that you stepped away and challenged yourself with suddenly becomes so stressful that you end up with the, cortisol, right? The cortisol then starts to build up around the memory systems of your brain. I believe it's the hippocampus. And it builds up around the hippocampus and it interferes with the creation of neural connections, new dendrite connections. And because of that, it can actually interfere with the processing and growth of your brain. Maybe it even sets it backwards because the stress of actually earning money from what used to be a productive, healthy hobby then actually interferes with the growth of the neural structures inside your brain, sending you backwards.
My foster father actually nailed the terminology this time. Combinatory play is exactly what Einstein called it. He's also correct that chronic stress from hustle culture releases cortisol, which research shows can impair the hippocampus and hinder new neural connections. However, cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands. It doesn't physically build up around the memory systems like plaque. But for a man who can't read very well, my foster father did a pretty decent job of explaining. Instead of reading, he's using AI to create a brief about the research and theory. He then runs a veracity check on this brief before entering it into another AI that creates a podcast for him to listen to. He uses that to learn the ideas that he then narrates. We've decided to post these podcasts on a companion YouTube channel called Study Notes, alongside some of the extra footage that he captures while filming these Plog vlog episodes. There's a link to that channel in the description if you would like to hear more details about these concepts. Now, let's sum up what all this means for your own routine. We've found that engaging in complex, tactile hobbies physically alters the brain through neuroplasticity, building a robust cognitive reserve that helps protect against age-related decline. However, to actually reap these benefits, you must avoid the mastery trap by ensuring the hobby remains continually challenging, and you must avoid the hustle culture trap by keeping it unmonetized and free from chronic stress. Here is a tiny action you can try today. Engage in 10 minutes of a complex analog task that you are currently quite bad at. Whether that is attempting to juggle, practicing a few chords on an instrument, or trying to sketch a tree. Just let yourself be a frustrated beginner. Protecting our brains requires effort, but our bodies are evolutionarily wired to conserve energy. Crossing Wiseman's Ferry and heading into the Blue Mountains, we tackle this evolutionary mismatch and use intrinsic motivation to bypass willpower, to choose wellness over extreme comfort. I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. Today, after crossing Wiseman's Ferry and then heading up to the Blue Mountains, we're exploring whether people value comfort more than wellness. I'll let my foster father explain.
That's the Wiseman Ferry crossing down there. We've just come across that from the Lower McDonald and we're heading to Katoomba today. And the question that I'm thinking about along the way is, do people in my country value comfort more or do they value wellness more? The reason why this is important is because this channel is trying to promote people to seek discomfort, seek difficult things for the purpose of creating antifragility in their bodies and minds. So if people value wellness more, maybe they'll be willing to actually do difficult things rather than seek out comfort all the time if they see the value in it. Whereas if people value comfort more, then they're more likely to take the gifts of the AI Santa than to seek out things that are likely to promote mental and physical wellness. Having just mentioned the AI Santa, I really should review what that is because it's been a while since we filmed the Christmas video. The AI Santa is the concept that AI will give us everything we want and need eventually. And there are some experts like Goodhart who believe that that'll happen within a decade or so. If that happens, and AI removes all struggle and all need to strive in the world, then will we as humans make the choice to seek out adversity just because adversity is good for us? Let's see what the research says.
My foster father is touching on the tension between hedonic well-being, seeking immediate pleasure and comfort, and eudaimonic well-being, which relies on purpose and effort. If AI eventually removes all cognitive and physical friction from our environment, we risk entering a world where our bodies and brains never have to adapt and improve. It could end up being a life of constant atrophy. Before we look closer at that evolutionary trap, it's time for the usual intermission story about my mother. It was late August in 1993, and my mother Liz and her childhood friend David had just escaped the exhausting bargaining culture of Pamukkale in what was then called Turkey. They boarded a long-distance coach heading towards Bergamo, hoping for a quiet transit, but quickly discovered exactly why these regional buses were locally notorious. The driver treated the winding, mountainous roads less like a public transport route and more like a high-stakes racetrack. The coach careened down steep hills at terrifying speeds. From her window seat, Liz watched the speedometer needle bounce completely off the dial, pushing well past 120 kilometers per hour. As the driver aggressively forced oncoming cars onto the shoulder and blindly overtook slower vehicles on tight corners, the two friends handled the intense stress in completely different ways. David naturally retreated entirely into his own head. He stared out the window, quietly philosophizing about global overpopulation as a way to mentally distance himself from the immediate threat of a head-on collision. Liz, however, stayed hyper-focused on the physical reality. Gripping her armrests until her knuckles turned white, she remained locked in sheer survival mode, hyper-vigilant to every sway of the chassis. The climax of this white-knuckle ride happened as they tore through the city of Izmir. The sprawling metropolis was choked by a heavy, suffocating blanket of smog. For Liz, the contrast was incredibly stark. The adrenaline-fueled danger inside the speeding bus, set against the slow, quiet environmental disaster just outside the glass. Miraculously, they arrived in Bergamo in one piece. Stepping off the bus onto solid ground felt like a profound luxury. Bergamo was quiet, slightly off the main trail, and blessedly free of both tourists and hawkers. After surviving the death bus, the simple peace of an empty street felt like a massive victory.
So it's the following morning, we're back at Govett's Leap in the Blue Mountains of Australia. And I'm here to, which you probably can't see me, I'm here to explore that question about whether Australians are more interested in wellness or comfort. Now, despite the fact that Australians are perceived by themselves and the world as being sporty, fit people, only a small proportion of the population actually meet even the minimum activity guidelines. Let's look at the reasons why that might be. Now, one of them is there seems to be an embracing of like a softness culture, like treating yourself softly, going all the way to the point of being embracing, it seems, a thing called, what is it, bed rot, where you sit in a bed, lay in a bed for hours or even days, and seeing that as a good thing, something that is good for you because the rest of the world is so stressful. From looking at the research, there seems to be a comfort trap that comes from an evolutionary mismatch. And that evolutionary mismatch results from our brain having evolved in an environment where challenging things were common, where stressful things were common, and we needed to be able to rest intensely, to be able to recover, to survive, to move on, to cope with the next thing that we're going to have to struggle with. So in a modern society where we have created such comfort, we still have that ancient brain that pushes us towards resting and resting and resting because we think that we're going to have to cope with some life-threatening event. I don't know that I'm explaining that real well, but That's a great sunrise. So how do we resolve this evolutionary mismatch where it's so hard to actually find motivation to do challenging and difficult things? Maybe we're going about it the wrong way. Throughout this chapter, it's occurred to me that maybe instead of trying to find the motivation to do the challenging things, what we should find is challenging things that are internally motivating. For example, hobbies that would actually get us out of bed in the morning. I have no problems getting out of bed in the morning because creating these Plog vlog episodes is so internally motivating that I don't even want to stay in bed. I struggle to stay in bed. And here's me thinking that I wouldn't find.
My foster father just described an evolutionary mismatch, where our biology still demands we conserve energy for scarce times, leading to delay discounting, which means preferring immediate rest over long-term vitality. Relying purely on willpower to fight millions of years of evolution usually fails. Instead, as he notes, aligning physical effort with intrinsic motivation, like a passionate hobby, bypasses that resistance entirely. Our bodies are designed for antifragility. They require the friction of safe adversity to remain robust. If we blindly accept a culture of extreme comfort, embrace bed rot, or wait for an AI Santa to remove all effort, we risk deep physical and mental decline. To push back against this comfort trap, find one small moment of intentional friction today. Park at the furthest end of the car park, take the stairs instead of the lift, or walk outside without a jacket for 5 minutes to let your body adapt to the chill. Maybe you could go further by starting a mentally and physically challenging hobby that might be similar to what we do with Plog Vlog. By the way, if you want to explore deeper into these concepts, then we've created a YouTube channel called Study Notes that contains the AI-generated podcasts that my foster father uses to prepare for filming these episodes. These play against the backdrop of B-roll footage he films while out in the field. Intrinsic motivation can pull us out of the comfort trap. But is a life of eudaimonic effort the only way to be happy? In our final stop, travelling through Bulahdelah, Coffs Harbour and back to Brisbane, we weigh hedonic pleasure against eudaimonic effort, learning how to use neuroplasticity and epigenetics to actively shape our capacity for purpose. I'm Trinity Anderson, producer and narrator of Plog Vlog. Today, on a mountain at dawn in the Bulahdelah State Forest, then on a beach in Coffs Harbour, and finally on a littered road near home in Brisbane, we're exploring a complex question. Are hedonic and eudaimonic paths both roads to a good life? Let's go to that mountain at dawn.
I'm in the Bulahdelah State Forest, somewhere near Ted Baker's Lookout, about 230 kilometres from Sydney that way, and about 700 kilometres from Brisbane that way. And originally I was going to come up here to try to convince you to do similar things to this, to try and create things, try to live a life where you find a deeper meaning, because I'm working on the assumption that Viktor Frankl's theory of that humans need meaning in their life, otherwise they fall into an existential vacuum. I'm working on that assumption. But then, while I was studying for the different episodes for this chapter, I came across two ideas that the ancient Greeks had. One of them is the concept of eudaimonic way of living. Socrates used to, when he was asked a really difficult question, he would go off by himself and he would consult his inner demon. It's not the demon like the way we think of it nowadays. It's more like going and consulting your true self. And the eudaimonic movement out of that is very much based on living a life to try and find meaning that is consistent with your inner self. Then there's the other concept of hedonism, that a good life can be lived simply by seeking out the things that make you feel good. And I'm working on the assumption, or have been working on the assumption, and I might be wrong, that people will be better off living a eudaimonic life. Maybe. Hedonism is just as valid as trying to find meaning and purpose in life. And maybe people don't actually need to do that, or some people, actually that's probably a better way of putting it, because the feelings I have, if I live a hedonistic life, I feel a sense of boredom and meaninglessness and feeling like wondering what there is in life that could be more important than seeking out the next pleasure. I'm going to use this episode to explore that idea, whether hedonism is a more valid way of living for some people than being eudaimonic, and whether other people find hedonism unsatisfying and therefore are driven to try and find meaning in life. I think it's the second lot of people that are probably still listening. Others probably got bored and went and did something else.
My foster father described the concept of subjective well-being, which is the modern analogy of hedonism, and also the concept of psychological well-being, which aligns with the ancient Greek idea of eudaimonia. However, to be historically precise, Socrates' daimonion actually only ever spoke up to warn him against making a mistake, rather than guiding his positive actions. While my foster father comes back down the mountain, it's time for our usual intermission story. It was the 1st of September in 1993 when my mother Liz and her childhood friend David wandered down toward Anzac Cove on the Gallipoli Peninsula in Turkey. They had purposefully ventured far beyond the curated, pristine tour paths to walk the exact stretch of rugged, scrub-covered beach where thousands of young Australian soldiers had landed nearly 80 years prior. The shoreline was eerily quiet, offering a stark and sobering contrast to the exhausting hustle of the Turkish cities they had recently left behind. As they walked slowly along the historic pebbly shore, David suddenly stopped in his tracks. Liz watched closely as he bent down and carefully lifted something small from the dry dirt. It was the skeletal remains of a fallen soldier, a single, sun-bleached finger bone, still lying exposed to the harsh elements after all those decades. Liz observed a profound, grounding shift in David's demeanour. He stood completely frozen, staring intently at the fragment in his hand. Just 5 years earlier, in a small country town gym, a heavy leg press machine had unexpectedly collapsed. The brutal impact had compound dislocated David's ring finger, violently tearing through the skin and leaving 2 centimetres of his own white joint and bone fully exposed. Being alone. He had grabbed the unexposed part of his finger with his other hand and forcefully pulled the bone back into his body so that he could drive himself to the hospital. Looking at the unknown soldier's finger resting in his palm, the illusion of youth and invincibility suddenly shattered for David. Liz watched in quiet, solemn respect as he knelt down and gently buried the bone in the earth. For him, the stark reality was undeniable. That piece of dry calcium in the dirt looked exactly like his own. He realized with absolute clarity his own fragile mortality.
Now that you're back from the intermission story, I really have to declare my own biases. You see, I love my life. I love coming out here first thing in the morning, picking up litter, and feeling like I'm actually making a difference. Talking to people like you who I might be able to make some difference in their lives. But you see, there's a lot of people in my life who prefer to live hedonistically, or maybe are genetically programmed to live hedonistically. And before the break, I was hoping that their lives could be as satisfying and happy as mine in the long term. Unfortunately, from the research that I've looked at, yes, hedonistic living gives a measure of perceived happiness in the short term. But in the long term, unfortunately, no, it doesn't pan out as being as healthy and satisfying as a life spent searching for meaning. That said, it is a continuum. You've got hedonism on this side, and you've got the eudaimonic or search for meaning way of living over here. And a life spent just searching for meaning can result in a person ending up being a burnt out martyr. So we have to come back in this direction occasionally to recover. The problem is that our society is so focused on promoting a hedonistic way of living that a lot of people are living this way pretty much all the time. If you ask them what their meaning in life is, hello beautiful, then they probably couldn't tell you, or what is it that they're searching for as a meaning in life. So really, it is the society we live in that focuses on this that is the problem, which overly biases the hedonistic way of living and doesn't put value or as much value or promotes living in a eudaimonic way. That is the problem. Now, there is a genetic component as well. Some people are genetically predisposed towards seeking out meaning and purpose through effort. And I'm like that. Like literally, if I sit still, I get itchy. I need to get out somewhere like this and doing this. Whereas others are genetically predisposed towards a hedonistic way of living. But that isn't a life sentence. If people who are genetically predisposed towards this intentionally do some of this, then gradually their genetic response and their bodily response starts to drift in this direction. Now, it might not be automatic like someone like me, but they can work towards this direction. So it's my hope that through videos like this, some people will watch towards the end and choose to move this way through effort rather than get stuck there and end up with all the negative long-term outcomes psychologically and physically.
When my foster father mentions our bodies and genetics shifting, he is referring to neuroplasticity and epigenetics, where behaviour and environment can physically alter how genes express themselves over time. The consensus in positive psychology actually supports the concept of living a full life, arguing that eudaimonia without any hedonic pleasure can quickly lead to burnout. The last 3 episodes were filmed while driving a borrowed electric vehicle 2,000 kilometres through the Australian state of New South Wales. Let's see what we found when crossing back into Queensland.
Yesterday we finished a 2,000 kilometre trip through the state of New South Wales picking up litter. And it was actually quite a pleasure because there was very little litter there. They had a program called Don't Be a Tosser, which discouraged people from dumping litter like this. Then we got back to Queensland and we realised that Queensland has such an embedded littering culture that signs like this make no difference at all. So fortunately, Plog Vlog has developed 2 complementary paths. One of them is promoting picking up litter, but the other one is promoting general wellness, general well-being. And while we're in Queensland, without tearing my motorcycle jacket on this barbed wire, while we're in Queensland, we're not going to pick up all this. This is just beyond us. It's beyond us to influence Queensland to become a less littering culture. But what we can do is pick up these cans and get money from that at Containers for Change to promote our wellness message.
In this final episode of Plog Vlogs Chapter 5, my foster father highlighted that while hedonic comfort offers short-term relief, heavily prioritising it over eudaimonic effort leaves us vulnerable to an existential vacuum, especially in a future where artificial intelligence might remove our need to struggle entirely. However, believing you are simply genetically wired for pure comfort is a trap. Through intentional practice, we can actively reshape our capacity for purpose. While creating the last 2 chapters, 20 episodes filmed in places like Uganda, the United Kingdom, Europe, Turkey, and back home in Australia, we have met many inspirational people and learned some things that might one day become wisdom. One of those things is to value the importance of complex hobbies. Creating these Plog Vlog episodes is our own complex hobby, one that takes us to amazing places and helps us meet extraordinary people. Our hope is to inspire others to embrace similar hobbies that could enhance their lives. While you think about that, here is a tiny action you can try today. Choose one small, slightly uncomfortable task that serves your community or environment and complete it without seeking any reward or recognition. If you want to hear the deep dive research behind today's concepts, check out our companion channel, Plog Vlog Study Notes. It features the AI-generated research podcasts my foster father uses to prepare for these episodes, playing uninterrupted over our ambient, uncut B-roll footage. On screen now, over footage filmed during Christmas in London. The next episode is hovering on the left, and our compilations are waiting for you on the right. And please, pick up 5.